Thank you, Ashwini. Thank you, Semili. So I'd like to introduce the speaker of the day. Our speaker today is Thomas Kral. He's a training consultant with the British Council and a PhD researcher with Lancaster University. He has been involved in language education for 25 years as a teacher, teacher trainer, materials writer, and project manager. He has worked on British Council teacher development projects in Sri Lanka, Malaysia, Thailand, Rwanda, and most recently on the English Connects project in Sub-Saharan Africa. Thomas has been engaging with gender topics in language education for more than a decade and has frequently embedded gender-related themes into his teaching and teacher training. He is currently based in Andhra Pradesh and is conducting research with first-generation female students in higher education on the social justice implications of studying in an English medium college. On this note, I hand over to Thomas and invite him to start the session. Over to you, Thomas.
Okay, thank you very much for the introduction, Bhavna, and thank you also, Ashwini, for going over the housekeeping rules. Let me just share my screen now, make sure that everything is working. Okay. Okay, so I hope everyone can see my screen now. And I'd like to start by thanking everybody for joining today. I know there are many people from India, where I am based, and I'm based in Andhra Pradesh. There are also people joining from around the world, so I'd like to welcome everybody to this webinar. I'm thrilled to have been offered the opportunity to deliver a webinar on gender and language education. As Bhavna said, it's an issue that I'm very passionate about, and I'm very happy to share my ideas with you and also to hear your ideas about this topic. So I look forward to a fruitful hour of input, some feedback from your end, and then some Q&A after that. So yeah, let's get started, and let's talk about our objectives for today, for this evening here in India. So first of all, I'd like to offer a definition of gender inequality, and that will allow us to reflect on kind of subconscious gender bias and its impacts, including impacts on education and on language. So then we're going to explore, a little bit more on the causes of gender bias and how that is reflected in teaching and in language teaching materials specifically. We're going to also look at the language itself within English and how English is used, and see how we can kind of transfer to use more gender neutral language. And then finally, I'll finish with sharing some practical classroom teaching ideas and some resources which I've used to address this subject and to promote gender equality. Okay, so it's a pretty full agenda, but there's going to be plenty of time for engagement from your side. So I look forward to doing that. So speaking of engagement from your side, I'd like to start with a poll, and so the question on the poll should be on your screen. So yeah, I'd like to ask you how you approach gender in language teaching, in language education, either as a teacher, teacher trainer, or administrator. So the first option is I regularly promote gender equality as part of my work. The second option, I don't often promote gender equality, but I think about it. And the third one is I don't usually think about gender as part of my work. Okay, so let's wait a little while for people to answer. And I can see the results coming up, and they're overwhelmingly for regularly promoting gender as part of your work, which is great. Okay, so we've had 63 responses so far, 65, and 83%, 84% are saying that they regularly promote gender equality as part of their work, which is wonderful. 10% say they don't often promote it, but they think about it, so they're kind of in the middle. And then 7% say they don't do it. Okay, so some more are coming in. Okay, we've got 80 now, 81% say that they regularly promote. This is quite interesting. So it tells me something about the audience. So this is also quite interesting for me. Okay, so I think we can stop the poll now. We have a very good idea about your initial reaction to the subject. So that's great. So we can stop the poll now. I guess it's Priya who's running the poll. Okay, so I hope everyone can see the results. Okay, so I've just clicked on share results and then I'll stop sharing the result. Okay, wonderful. Good, so just move on to my next slide. Okay, so thank you for taking part in that poll. It's always interesting to hear everybody's starting point. So yeah, let's start with the definition of gender inequality, so we're all kind of on the same page. And this was an appealing one that I have seen, and I've borrowed this from actually other presenters who've done presentations on similar topics. And so there's a reference below, a source below. So basically, it's gender inequality is allowing or restricting people different opportunities due to perceived differences based on issues of gender. So that's kind of important to highlight that, allowing or restricting people opportunities because of ideas about gender. Okay? And when we speak of restrictions, we're usually talking about restrictions on women or restrictions on girls. But this definition acknowledges that anyone can experience gender-based discrimination based on biases and stereotypes. So discrimination isn't only against women, only against girls, but it predominantly does apply to women and girls based on evidence. So that's kind of the understanding we're working with. But we do leave room for anyone being able to experience gender-based discrimination. Okay, so that's our starting point. So we're all on the same page. Okay, so this is probably a set of symbols many of you are familiar with. These are the Sustainable Development Goals that many teachers work with. So this is the United Nations Agenda for 2030, sorry. And it's a series of goals for sustainable development. And of course, gender equality is goal number 5. It features prominently. And basically by 2030, all countries are meant to achieve gender equality and empower all girls and women. So the UN agrees with the previous definition that in order to achieve gender equality, we need to empower girls and women, basically. So this is quite an important kind of marking point for us. And of course, we're talking about education, and education intersects very much with gender and gender equality. And basically, so the target number 4.5 in the goal number 4, quality education, is to eliminate gender disparities in education. So this is a very tall order. There has been progress made, but we still have ways to go. So this is the background that we're working with. Okay, so we're going to do a survey, and this is something I also borrowed from a colleague, which I really liked. And this is something that I've called a finger survey, for lack of a better word. So we use our fingers to do this survey, and it's just a bit of an idea for yourself of where you stand on gender issues. So let's see how we do. So you're going to see some statements about gender. And in those statements, there are going to be 5 statements. Yeah? And if you agree, you don't lift any fingers. Yeah, you just keep your hands in a fist. If you kind of agree, 50-50, you lift one finger. Okay. And if you disagree with the statement, you lift 2 fingers. And make sure you keep your fingers lifted. Yeah. So for the first question, you might lift 2 fingers. For the second question, you might lift 1. For the third, you might not lift any, but keep your fingers lifted until the end. And you may need 2 hands. So just keep your fingers in the air. Okay, so let's start our finger survey. Okay, good. So the first statement is sex and gender are the same thing. Okay, so if you agree, don't do anything. If you half agree, if you're 50-50, lift 1 finger. If you disagree, lift 2 fingers. Okay, so keep the fingers lifted, and let's do question number 2, or statement number 2. So number 2 is boys are often better in mathematics and science than girls are. Okay, boys are often better in mathematics and science than girls are. Okay, do you agree? So if you agree, 0 fingers, half agree, disagree. Okay, so this is in addition to your previous finger, so you can hold up as many fingers as you have for the 2 statements. Number 3, nowadays, women and men with similar jobs earn equal pay. Okay, agree, half agree, disagree. Number 4, as women's rights have increased, men seem to have less status and position in society. What do you think? As women's rights have increased, men have lost status and position in society. That's number 4. Okay. And number 5, when making decisions, men tend to be more rational, while women tend to be more emotional. Okay, so that was the last statement. So you should have some fingers in the air, no more than 10. That's all we have. So 10 is the maximum. You could have 7 or 8 or 3 or no fingers at all. Yeah, so you should have your hands raised in the air, and now just count how many fingers you have lifted. Okay. Okay, so the question is, how many fingers are you holding up? Okay, so let us know in the chat box. Okay, so let's open up the chat box. Let us know how many fingers you're holding up. So some people are holding up 3 fingers, 2 fingers, 10 fingers, 9, 8, 4. Okay, so we've got, yeah, some high numbers, 7 fingers. Okay. 5 fingers, good, okay. Good, 7, thank you. Okay, ooh, some people have 10 fingers. Okay, wonderful. So we have a wide range of number of fingers in the air. So let's see the result. What does all this mean? Why am I asking you to lift fingers? So if you have 0 to 3 fingers, if you have 0, 1, 2, or 3 fingers, you're at the start of your exploration of gender inequality. And this webinar provides a good starting point, a good foundation, okay? So, and you get a little emoji with a mustache. Okay, if you have between 4 and 7 fingers, which I think are many people, that means you are well into your journey exploring gender topics. This webinar will hopefully propel you, push you forward on your journey. So you get kind of an in-between phase. And some of you, I know some of you raised 8, 9, or 10 fingers. So that means you're a champion of gender equality. Keep exploring and spread the word to colleagues, to friends. But we have to remember, everybody has subconscious biases, including ones about gender. So anyone, the biggest feminists in the world, everybody has some gender biases. And the goal of today is to make us think about those biases and what we can do about them in our classrooms and just also maybe in our daily lives. Okay, wonderful. So that was just a fun quiz for everyone, and let's move forward. And the quiz although it was fun, it brought together some interesting issues, which I'd like to discuss. So the first question was sex and gender, and are they the same or different? So in contemporary and modern day sociology, they are considered quite different. Yeah? And so basically sex refers to biological differences determined by nature, and these are not changeable generally. I mean, I'm not talking about surgeries or anything like this. So basically, yeah, biological sex is the way we're born, male or female, and that's mostly it. Yeah? And we're not discussing this biological sex so much today. But what we are more interested is gender. And so when it comes to gender, we're talking about socially constructed identities, roles, and symbols. So by socially constructed, I mean, what are people's perceptions? What has society and what have our cultures kind of cultivated as an idea of what boys and girls, men and women should be doing? How should they be dressing? How should they be behaving and things like this. So these are constructed roles, identities, and symbols, maybe also what jobs they should be doing. These change over time, and they're also different between communities. When you go to some countries, you see many female bus drivers. In other countries, you don't see any female bus drivers, but you see women on construction sites when you don't see them in other places. So things like this. These are just constructed roles and identities for people. So this is what we're talking about, and some of these are based on gender. So just a simple example, you can see these two symbols for toilets or bathrooms for boys and girls that you often see in schools. And we see many of these socially constructed symbols in these two pictures. So we see the boy and the girl, yeah, fair enough. The boy is represented in blue, the girl is represented in pink. So there's nothing to say that boys should be represented by blue, girls pink. These are just simply colors, and we as a society have associated boys with blue, girls with pink. Yeah. Similarly, the boy has a short haircut and the girl has long hair. So again, long hair is often connected with women and girls, short hair with boys and men. It hasn't necessarily always been like this. It's just something that we have come to expect. The boy is wearing shorts and a t-shirt. The girl is wearing a skirt or a dress. Again, these are socially constructed symbols of what we think boys and girls should be wearing. The boy is active, going like this, yeah, and the girl is not in such an active position. Again, this represents different behaviors that we think that we attribute to boys and girls, and they're not necessarily biologically determined. That's just sort of our expectations and our ideas that have been constructed. So these are the basics of that discussion. So sex and gender are considered to be quite different and separate. Okay, other takeaways from our finger survey. So gender gaps in maths and sciences. Now, some of you probably have observed, yeah, but we get many boys doing well in maths and sciences, and the girls don't seem that interested. But these gender gaps that we might observe are shaped not by natural ability, but by gender norms, biases, and stereotypes. So girls aren't encouraged to go into maths and sciences. These are often considered boys' domains. And this is backed up by research. Yeah, it's not a natural ability. It's simply gender identity and constructed and perceived limitations. As far as equal pay for equal work or equal qualification, that we are not there. Women earn 23% less than men for doing similar work, for similar qualifications. So, and this is on a global scale. These are numbers from around the world. the question about men losing their status compared to if women's rights increase, I personally disagree with that. This is a qualitative discussion. I don't think men lose status at all. Status is not a zero-sum game. Status is something that's shared, and it's not necessarily one has more than another in terms of gender. I don't believe that. Personality traits, this is something we often hear. Women are emotional, men are irrational. Again, these are social constructions. There isn't research to suggest these are biologically determined. So again, there are, this is based largely just on perceptions and socially constructed identities. So yeah, that's basically the takeaway from that little finger survey. I'd like to continue along this line with another short quiz, and this is based on numbers. And I've just highlighted 4 really important figures to show you. And I'm going to get you to offer your prediction in the chat. So share your answers in the chat box. Just put A, B, or C for number 1. So this is about housework and care work, like caring for children or caring for elderly people. How much do women do compared to men? And this is almost always unpaid work. So do women spend 2 times as many hours as men doing this kind of work? Is it 2.5 times, or is it 5 times? Okay, so let's see some of your. Okay, so we have some people saying B, C, B, 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 C, C, C. So it's between B and C. Okay, so a lot of people think it's 5 times. Some people think it's only 2 times. So I'll give you the answer. On a global scale, it is 2.5. So this might be an underestimate. It's different in different parts of the world, different, but as a general tendency around the world, according to the UN, women spend 2.5 times more hours compared to men on unpaid housework and care work. Okay, good. So number 2, this is about the share of women in parliaments, in global parliaments. So here are the 3 options: 48%, 34%, or 26%. Okay, and most people are saying C, and some people are saying B, some people are saying A. Again, it depends on the country, but this is an average for the whole world at a point in time, I guess right around now. Well, interestingly, it's only 26%. Yeah, so it's quite low. And somebody said it's B for India. Maybe it's higher in India than in other places. Yeah, in some countries, it's actually quite high. It's 50-50. I know in Rwanda and in Africa, it's quite high. In other places, it's very low. So, but 26% globally. So women are not there yet in an equal position in the highest decision-making roles. Okay. So the third one is, some people say it's C for India. Okay, so we're not sure. I'm not sure what the number is for India. Okay, so number 3, this is a bit serious, but I think an important statistic to look at. So what percent of women have been victims of physical or sexual violence by a husband or a partner? Okay, this is an unpleasant one, but I think we need to pay attention to these kinds of things. So lots of people are saying C, some people are saying B. Okay, so indeed, I'll give you the solution. It is actually, officially, it's 1 in 4 women. So 25% of women have been victims, but this is only an official number. And according to most experts, that number is probably much higher because so much of this kind of violence goes unreported. So gender-based violence is frequently not reported because the women are not in a position to be able to report it. So yeah, something to keep in the back of our minds. And Then we're talking about child brides and child grooms for our last question. So early childhood marriage or childhood marriage is a problem for both boys and girls. And there's been some attention on child grooms as well as child brides. But women still are, or girls are married off as children much more often than boys. So here, you know, it's a guess. Is it double? Is it triple? Or is it 6 times? So most people think it's 6 times. Some people think it's triple. Yeah, so it's actually, it's 6 times more. 19% of girls around the world are forced to marry, compared to only 3% of boys as children. So the answer is C. Okay, so I've thrown enough information at you, but I think this is an important backdrop for the rest of our webinar today, because we see that there are many challenges that face us. And as educators, as teachers, we must feel compelled to try to work towards solving some of these issues and helping to readdress the imbalances in our society. Okay. So now let's move on to gender in education generally and in language education specifically. So let's just remind ourselves that the goal is to eliminate gender disparities in education by 2030, which is very challenging. And let's look also at what the NEP 2020 says, which is the National Education Policy for India, for the Indian context. It's quite a well-known document in India. So the NEP tells us while the Indian education system has made steady progress towards bridging gender and social category gaps in all levels of school education, large disparities still remain. So that last highlighted bit is what we're thinking about. The large disparities still remain in education. So we see that the classroom context is still part of the problem, but we can also make it part of the solution. So we're going to start looking at this now. Okay, so this is, we're going to go to the UK now, where an experiment was done on gender perceptions. And it was carried out in a classroom with very small children. They were between 5 and 7, so kind of, yeah, preschool or very early years, first year primary. And so the children were asked to draw pictures of 3 different professions. So, and they were also asked to create identities. And this is featured on a YouTube video. Maybe some of you have seen this already. So the children were asked to draw a surgeon. Okay, then they were asked to draw a pilot and a firefighter. So this was their task, to draw these people and to give them a name and identity. Okay, and you know, when we're done after 7 o'clock or tomorrow, you can watch the video if you haven't seen it. It's quite interesting. So this is what the typical student drew, and I've taken some screenshots. So, you know, they drew surgeons, and, you know, this is the typical picture. So here's Surgeon Joe, here's Pilot Tom, and here's Firefighter Matt. So this is the usual thing that the children drew. So just from your side, the children drew 66 pictures altogether. How many do you think they drew as women? How many did they draw as men? From 66, just as a friendly guess. We're playing lots of guessing games here. So you think somebody, Nanasi says 20 were drawn as women. I'm not sure if that's an old answer or a new one. Only 1, 20, 60 men, 6 women, 5 to 61, 50 men. Okay, so only 1, majority men. Okay, so I think people get the idea. So in fact, 5 were drawn as women and 61 as men. So yeah, it's pretty predominant as so very male centric, and so these were considered very male centric jobs. for these children, and the children had some visitors. So they invited visitors to the classroom, people who actually held these jobs. And here they are. These are the people who came into the classroom. There's Surgeon Tenzin. She came in, and then firefighter Lucy came in, and pilot Lauren came in. And the look on the children's faces was precious. Here they were shocked. They were expecting most likely men, and they got 3 women. So this was, you could see the look on their faces. Okay, so then after I watched the video, I looked at the comments below, and sometimes if you read the comments below YouTube videos or on Twitter, it's quite frightening. There were some really quite mean-spirited comments, and some of the more polite ones were, well, you know, this reflects the reality in our society. This is what children see. We shouldn't, you know, there's nothing wrong with this. And okay, well, right, the children are representing what they see in society. That's true, but this is important. Children, according to studies, and I've got a reference for you in a moment, according to very recent studies, children from the age of 6 often decide which jobs they can and cannot do later in life. So they make decisions early on that exclude certain jobs for them, and this is based on gender and other social stereotypes or ideas that they have about which people can do which jobs. So obviously, these children thought, well, these are jobs generally done by men. And if there was a girl in that class that wanted to become a pilot, and she didn't allow herself to become one because of her lived experience of only seeing women pilots represented in society, then she limited herself from her dreams, and that would be a shame. So these types of perceptions really do have an impact. And as educators, we must consider this. We must think about it. So yes, it reflects a reality, but is it a reality that we should challenge? And I believe that it is a reality that we should challenge. Okay, so that's the source. So the question is, where do these stereotypes come from, okay, among these children? So sure, they see people around them, they see firefighters, pilots on television in real life who are mostly men, but also they get it in their schools. So this is a learning resource, and this is provided by the British Council for a Gender Equality course, and I'll give you the link to the Gender Equality online course later. But this is a very good example of a resource that children might get early on in their education as primary learners. And you can see how girls and boys are represented in this material. So we see the girls playing with dolls. We see the boys playing with airplanes, trains, and lorries. We see on the right side, we see the girl dreaming of her wedding day, being a mother, playing with her doll, and we see the boy dreaming of being a doctor or a surgeon. So this is, the children get the perceptions from somewhere, and they often get it from their teaching material, as well as from all the other influences in their lives. So there's little wonder that it's boys who become interested in engineering and becoming pilots and becoming engineers and surgeons, and girls are not so inclined. So these are the kinds of materials that students are exposed to. And yeah, as teachers, we have to kind of think about how we deal with this. What do we do about this? So let's look at English textbooks specifically. And since most of the participants are from India, I thought I would look at the Indian context for gender representation in English language teaching textbooks. It's probably similar everywhere. So again, we've got another guessing game. So what percent of characters do you think in English textbooks published here by the NCERT, which is the National Council for Educational Research and Training, which is an organization I think most teachers are familiar with or have dealings with. It's one of the larger publishers of textbooks used around India. They publish some pretty good quality English textbooks. So what percentage of the characters in English teaching textbooks are female? What percentage would you say? All the characters in the book are actually represented as female. Okay, so this is a percentage this time. So I'd like you to take a guess. What do you think? What percentage? So I'm not sure if I'm looking at old numbers or new numbers. Okay, so definitely, so people think 50%, less than 30%. So we've got a wide variety of answers. So I will give you the proportion. Okay. So this is the answer. 19% are female and 76% are male. If you notice, I've reversed the typical colors. So I put the males in pink and the females in blue. So, and 5% would be, cartoon characters, who don't have a defined gender. So, yeah, only 19% are represented as females. So that, again, gives students a certain message. The people who are active in society, who are represented in material in their English language books are female. 76% are male. It's very predominantly male. And other publishers have mostly similar numbers. This was done by an independent research team. Yeah, so this is again a demonstration of what our children in schools are exposed to, and so I'd like to kind of extend this idea. So gender representation in the Marigold series. The Marigold is a series published by NCERT. So I'm going to show you 10 images. Yeah, 10 images of people doing jobs. And I'll flash it on the screen for 10 seconds. I'd like you to study the picture and identify the jobs that you see. So take a look. So there are 10 jobs. Try to see, the jobs are not written down. They're represented by pictures. So just take a look at the picture and try to work out what the jobs are. Some are easy to recognize, some are not. But just try to recognize the jobs each of the people are doing. And I'll only give you 10 seconds, so it'll be very quick. Okay, so here we go. These are the jobs. Okay, I think that was about 10 seconds. That was generous. So here we are. Here are all the jobs. Here are the 10 jobs. You can see which ones you guessed correctly. But for our purposes today, we want to know how many of these jobs in these resources were represented by women. Yeah? And which ones do you remember? Okay, so you can see if anyone remembers who's got a good memory. Okay, teacher and driver were women, someone said. The doctor was a woman. Postman and teacher. Teacher and doctor. Teacher and nurse. Okay, so let's have a look again. So yeah, if you see, if we look at it again, it's the teacher and the nurse. I think it was listed as a nurse rather than a doctor, because we have a dental surgeon above. So yeah, and notice these are often typically female jobs, being a nurse or being a school teacher, and the other jobs were represented by men. So just an example of some of this sort of gender representation in even contemporary books, and the books are probably quite good, but yeah, we still see some gaps in how these jobs are presented. Okay, and So our purpose here isn't to be critical of the NCERT. The organization has actually got a Department of Gender Studies, and their policies are very clear on promoting gender equality. And they've come out, I think several years ago, with a very comprehensive guide for teachers on how to implement gender equality measures in the classroom. And it's a really useful piece of work, actually. And I suggest all of you have a look at it in the next few days and weeks, and it's full of really interesting guidelines and ideas. So I was very impressed that the NCERT is reforming and leading a reform of not only teaching material, but approaches and ideas that teachers can take in the classroom. And we're going to look at some highlights. I've had a look at it, and we're going to look at some highlights because I think it's really relevant to look at what the department is doing. I think Ashwini is going to share the link with you, but the slides will become available to you. You can link to it in your own time as well. Okay, so we're now going to look at in their material in this PDF. There's some focus on language. So there are some gender biased terms that we use, and the NCERT gives us alternative gender inclusive terms. So kind of vocabulary words which we often use, which are in fact biased, gender biased. So these are some examples from their list that I have collected, and let's see how we do as a group. So the first one is fireman, yeah, and of course we've seen firefighter. We've already seen in the little experiment that was done with the 5 to 7 year olds that we don't call them firemen but firefighters, yeah. So what about policeman? So we have a fireman as a firefighter, policeman is a, okay, and you can share your ideas in the box. We start off very easy, they get more difficult. Okay, police officer. Good, we've got people jumping way ahead already. So we have a police officer. So we have chairman, and chairman turns into, okay, I think people said chairperson already, great. Okay, what about mankind? Mankind. Okay, so we saw people on humankind. Okay, so people are saying humankind for mankind. So yeah, we can use humankind instead of mankind. What about manpower though? Manpower, that's one that they, what do we think about manpower? Human power? Does that work? Human power? Not so sure. Human power, it's a nice phrase, but manpower, meaning like the kind of employment market, the workforce is what the NCERT suggests. Okay, so we have our on the chat we have people saying things like actor instead of actor and actress. People say we use just actor for both men and women. What about this one as the verb to man a help desk, for example, or to man a booth at a conference? What do you think about to man something, to man a help desk, to engage, to support? Okay, so we have to staff a help desk is what the NCERT suggests. Okay. So the next one we have is a man-made disaster. I think somebody put man-made in the chat. What do we do about man-made? Can we have a couple more people? Man-made. A man-made disaster, a human disaster. Human-made disaster. Yeah, let's see what if the anthropological disaster. I like that one. Okay. Human-created disaster. Okay, and this one and the next one isn't actually from the NCERT. The British Council team was talking about this one. What about headmaster? Because the word master and mistress doesn't really, yeah, I don't know. It's like bachelor and spinster. They're not very equal-minded, are they? So what do we say about headmaster? So principal, I know the college where I volunteer is we say principal, but at a college, and our staff said here the head of school. Yeah, so the British Council team talked about a head of school or head teacher. Yeah, so anyways, so these are terms that we often throw around, like manpower or whatever, but they matter. Yeah, if they're all male gendered, then the assumption is that that person's always a man, and that's not really fair. That's not always the case, and in the future it certainly won't be the case if we change the language. So this is a process. It's not something that happens overnight, but I think the guidelines are solid, and it's something that we should pay some attention to. Just because I think it's the right thing to do, and so I hope that you know, if you're already doing this, you can also raise colleagues' awareness about this, because these are terms we still hear all the time. So good, we've got lots of ideas. Good, so thank you for the contributions. This is great. Okay, so we often hear about pronouns these days, so we can't ignore pronouns. So how do we neutralize gendered pronouns? So we often hear an entrepreneur is something like this. An entrepreneur is someone who works for himself. So himself, yeah. What can we say? How can we neutralize an entrepreneur, someone who works for oneself? Okay, yeah, that might work. So oneself is a nice idea. This comes from British Council material, and the British Council says that entrepreneurs are people who work for themselves. So here we've pluralized, so from the grammatical point of view, we've pluralized the subject and changed to a plural pronoun. So we've taken the necessity to use a gendered pronoun out of it. So that works. Okay, and sometimes that's not possible though. So for example, if we have something like this, the CEO is the highest ranking employee in any organization. He reports to the board of directors. Okay, so someone says oneself is considered arcane in the UK, which is interesting. Yeah. So he reports to the board of directors. So what do we have there? So people are saying they. Well, people are saying if the grammar is right, for plural themselves, the grammar is right. Yeah. Okay. So of course we can manipulate the grammar of the sentence. We can change it around. But we use nowadays they is actually used as a singular gender neutral pronoun. They or them, these words are often used as singular pronouns, and I think we just have to watch out for kind of grammar police types on exams, because so before we kind of actively teach this to students, we want to make sure that they don't get it wrong on some, as we say, arcane grammar exam. But the point is, the language changes as society changes, and they is a common pronoun for one person who is gender neutral, or the gender is undeclared, unknown. So yeah, I think language is flexible as you know, cultures and societies are flexible. So yeah, these are just some ways that we can eliminate gendered language and gender biased language in our work, and encourage others to do it, so that we get away from this idea that, you know, certain jobs are for men and that's it. So I think what we say matters, what the language that's used matters. And okay, so thank you again for the participation. I have one more slide about what we say to students and how we use language, and that's more how we, what we address, how we address students and what we say to them. And so this is something that we still hear teachers say sometimes. And the answers to this might be obvious to many people, but I think it's worth revisiting for the ones who might hear this around their schools. So why might teachers avoid saying some of these sorts of things to students? So for example, what a pretty girl. Yeah, like don't cry like a girl. You're a strong boy, aren't you? Yeah, and don't cry like a girl. So yeah, what do you think? I think it should be obvious, but why shouldn't? If you heard a teacher say this, what might you say? What might you say to them? If you pull them aside, say, look, that might not be a great idea. Men don't cry. Yeah. It should be stopped. Be a man, don't be shy. Yeah, what do you think? Why should we avoid saying these things to students? What's the problem? Okay, why shouldn't we say this? It's stereotype based, yeah. Emotions are common to both genders, yeah. It might create false impressions. Yeah, I mean, if you think about saying, oh, what a pretty girl, it might seem harmless, but this is sending a message that girls can only achieve something if they're pretty. And maybe it's not such a great message to send. Yeah, I mean, it seems innocent, but we might think about it. You're a strong boy, aren't you? Again, we're then making a generalization that boys should be muscular, strong, active. And if a boy isn't interested in that sort of thing, then that's not very inclusive. So yeah, we build up these stereotypes, and then they reproduce themselves. And yeah, we then exclude some boys who aren't interested in being big and strong, but want to do something different. So what we say really does matter. Don't cry like a girl. Somebody said, emotions are not just for girls. Boys can cry, and that's what happens. I mean, we shouldn't generalize in that way. That's my feeling. It reinforces stereotypes. It positions boys and girls in specific gender roles, which they may not be interested in, which might challenge their own ways of wanting to live. So yeah, I mean, some of these are instinctive, but this is advice from the NCERT about things that we should kind of think about and watch. So the NCERT advises that we should reward students by saying, well done, excellent work, good job. And of course, being concerned for boys and girls. Are you okay? What's the matter? And that sort of thing. So yeah, so again, what we say to students does matter. And kind of changes don't come overnight. This is again a process. And we might want to just be aware of how we speak to boys and girls, and do we do this differently? I certainly have, when I train teachers, I catch myself maybe using slightly different mannerisms with men and women. It's we all have these subconscious biases. So yeah, so we should positively pursue investigating these and thinking about them and reflecting on them. Okay, lovely. So the NCERT has many great ideas, as I've said. They advise us to tell stories with proactive females as leaders, heroes, and agents of change. So Often, these are depicted as men. We as teachers can change that perception. So if we find stories and of proactive females in positions that are prominent, then we should proactively produce that. We should ensure things like gender inclusive role play. So the girls get to play the CEO, get to play the firefighter, the superhero, and so on. And we should also ensure that girls have leadership roles and organizational roles as well as boys. So it's not the boys running everything. If we teach coeducational classes, mixed classes, mixed gender classes, we should ensure these things happen. And of course, we should ensure equal participation between boys and girls. I like the idea of inviting a guest speaker, like a female rickshaw driver. That's brilliant, absolutely. So there are lots of great ideas that we can do. That's really nice. Yeah, and tell stories. They're available online. I'm sure you could find stories in newspapers about things like female rickshaw drivers and things like this. Good. So this is something that's quite what I think is quite interesting. And this is also something that NCERT encourages us to do, is to track how boys and girls participation. So here it's actually helpful to have an observer. So this is a model of the classroom with the teacher at the front and the students sitting around. And we see the boys in pink, the girls in blue. And the observer, a colleague a peer observer is useful for this. And the peer observer can track how often we interact with different students in the class. So draw a line. The observer draws the diagram in her notebook and draws a line each time a student participates. And there's an interaction between student and teacher or between students. And this way we get to see how the students participate, and it lets us see only not if boys participate more than girls or vice versa, but it lets us see if certain students do or don't do. So I think that's quite an interesting idea. But the NCERT suggests, if you've noticed, and I've visited Indian classrooms here in India, and oftentimes they're sat in the way you see here, the boys on one side, the girls on the other. And the NCERT discourages this, and if you're teaching a mixed gender class, then they encourage us to mix up the students. So don't let them all sit in clusters, but mix them up. So that's something to consider doing as well. So, but I quite like this idea of tracking participation and saying, well, how am I actually expecting boys to answer the questions more often than girls, or how is it that I'm doing? So it's a great kind of reflective tool to see how we can work on generating a more equal classroom space. Good. So I just want to, before I go on to specific kind of classroom activities, I'd like to just go back to the definition of equality, because I think this is quite important. So we're back on SDG 5, to achieve gender equality and empower all women and girls. And here we see that equality really is a goal. Yeah, equality is a sustainable development goal. It's something that we want to achieve in the future. And in this case, we're going to achieve it by empowering girls and women. Okay, but I think as teachers, we often interpret equality in this way. So this is one of many such pictures that you can see. So here is equality. Yeah? So that means every student gets an equal share of resources. So here they are, 2 students, and this is the result of implementing equality. Of course, we see an obvious problem with this type of equality. It's not very inclusive. The boy is able to reach the books, but the girl isn't able to. They've received the same level of support. Okay, So that brings us to another concept, and that's equity. Yeah? So here we shift our thinking a little bit, and so we start thinking about equity, and here we see that the girl receives a different form of support, receives more support than the boy does to achieve that an equal opportunity. Yeah? So somebody has written correctly equity before equality. So exactly. So here we have the two side by side. I think these are pretty powerful images. Not, I'm sure many of you have seen them before, but I think they're important to revisit sometimes. So yeah, basically equality in this definition means everyone gets the same, and that doesn't really work very well here. So here, everybody gets what they need to have equal opportunity. And in the classroom, we do this, we call it differentiation. We give different students different support to what they need, based on what they need, based on their needs. And the idea is to achieve equal opportunity, to achieve some level of fairness, so that all students can access what they need in a fair way. So this is a powerful image, and I think this is something that we should think about in our classroom. Okay, our time is going, so I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. That's okay. And I'll send these slides to you. I think you've already gone over this. I think most people understand the difference between equality and equity. So basically the idea is that, yeah, equality is a long-term goal of fairness for all genders, but equity means providing extra support for those who need it. So as somebody in the chat room, in the chat box wrote, equity before equality. So equity measures will help achieve gender equality. So we can see let's go look at some examples from the classroom, yeah, in language teaching to close off our webinar. So this is something that happens right here in Andhra Pradesh at the college where I have volunteered. So this is a women's college here locally that I've done some teaching at and some research. And the students were in a class, they were working in groups, and they were asked to brainstorm the following question: what is a hero? So the lesson was all about heroes. What is a hero? And this is what they wrote. So these are different groups, and so we notice our familiar gendered ideas. So what is a hero? He should have courage, he should have good character, he should be an example to others, and so on. Here's another group. For a girl, a hero is always her dad. Yeah, him and his deeds are discussed. He who is admired for his efforts, and so on. And hero's an important role in life, a man who gives motivation. Okay, so, and this is an all women's class. That's quite interesting. So the principle of equity was applied in this lesson, yeah? So here what we have done is we've turned this lesson into something a little bit different. So the students were asked to tell their group about a woman who they look up to as a shiro instead of a hero, yeah? So instead of a man, they were asked to identify a woman who is a hero. And the lesson was called the Shiro lesson. And so they discussed in their groups, and each of them, talked about her Shiro. And then the students who would like to volunteer to share their Shiro with the class at the beginning of each lesson. One student makes a very short presentation about her Shiro, and they tell us the story of their Shiro. So this is really quite a nice experience for the students. When their immediate reaction was, oh, it's a man, it's a hero. Yeah, of course. So this is a simple exercise that any teacher can do when they're discussing such things. It gives students a more inclusive idea about role models, who can be a role model. Yeah? So this already changes the students' perception And it's a very simple thing to do. Okay, so okay, and if you teach young learners, this is brilliant. And I'll probably close with this one because I really, really like it. This was, I'm not generally a young learners teacher, but I thought this was great. So this is from a series called The World's Largest Lesson, and it's a great bank of lessons related to the Sustainable Development Goals. And this one they come from different countries around the world. And this one comes from India, and it's about gender equality, SDG 5, and it's called Chakra the Invincible and Mighty Girl and the Great Switcheroo. And the two characters are, they're superheroes in their secret life, but they're just regular kids in their ordinary life. So Leela and Raju. And there's a video, there's a lesson plan on gender equality, which is quite good, but the video is really great. And there's a comic book as well. And I just wanted to share this with you because I think it's quite nice. So there is Raju and there's Leela, and Leela's mother is calling her in to do the chores. So she wants to play with her friends, but she can't because she has to do the housework, and she's really disappointed. So before she goes home, her and Raju come across this special rock, which lets them switch personalities. So they keep the same bodies, but they change personality. So then Raju becomes Leela, Leela becomes Raju in appearance. And so it's Raju who has to go and do the housework, and it doesn't go very well. So there's Raju having all sorts of problems washing the dishes, and it's all horrible. Yes, Raju has to serve Leela's brothers their food and has to do the homework and all this sort of thing. And he says, "Oh no, we have to switch back." And there's Leela in Raju's appearance saying, "Oh, yeah, this is what I have to do all the time. That's a regular thing." So anyways, this is a great resource to use for young learners if you have students who would appreciate this, and maybe even for slightly older students. So this is one that I really liked as a lesson dedicated to gender equality. The British Council has a lesson as well called Taking Liberties based on SDG 5, which has some interesting things. I know our time is just about up, so I want to make sure there are enough there's enough time for Q&A. And there's also Breaking News English, which I really enjoy using with headlines, some of them dedicated to gender issues. They're kind of lighthearted lessons, but very informative. And there's a huge bank of lessons with lots of skills and vocabulary work for different levels of students. And you can, the same lesson on the same topic can be, has different levels, includes audio files. So it's really quite a nice resource, and I urge you to look at that. And also for those of you who are interested in exploring this topic more, I really suggest that you sign up for this course called Gender Equality in Language Education. It's an online 3-week course. I don't think it's going to happen again until 2023. So I think details are still emerging, but it's a really good course, and I've used some of the ideas from there for this workshop, for this webinar. So I urge everyone with an interest in this topic to sign up for that course. It's moderated by British Council moderators, so it's very, very good, and gives lots of good ideas and discussions. Okay, I know my time is up, so I just want to share a final thought with a quote that I really liked. And this quote says, "I'm uncompromising in the matter of women's rights. I should treat the daughters and sons on a footing of perfect equality." And the speaker is, maybe some of you have guessed it, it's Gandhi. And he said this on the 17th of October, 1929. Can you believe it? That's 93 years ago. And we're still not there, folks. So this is a call to action for all of us to think about and implement some ideas to achieve gender equality in our classrooms and in our society. Thank you very much for participating, and I look forward to your questions. And I'm going to stop sharing now. That's okay. And I think Bhavna is going to moderate the questions, the question and answer.
Yes. So a lot of questions, a lot of discussion has been happening, a lot of positive comments have been coming in. And I'm going to feed in some questions which have come in through the chat. So one question which has come in from Shrabani Ghosh. She says, my question is, as a teacher, what is the most genuine way to grow equality in the classroom? And she's also asked for what kind of activities can be done to spread gender equality in the classroom.
Okay, so I mean, a lot of the things we've talked about to really be genuine, to achieve genuine equality is just, it's a process. It's not a product. We have to think of it long term. Yeah, we're not the only ones in our students' lives. They have influences in their community, in their other classes, in what they see on television, what they read online. So we take little steps. Some of the ones that we talked about today, the way we behave and the way we approach things, we raise their awareness, we promote gender equality in the classroom in the ways we speak to them, in the way we treat the students. I mean, there are lots of different ideas from the chat box. Invite, you know, people who represent gender equality. Like, I love the idea of a female rickshaw driver coming in to talk to the students. Whatever resources are available to you in your context to promote gender equality. It just starts with, it starts with our interaction with students, and trying some of these activities that I've suggested, looking more up online and in the British Council resources. There's no shortage of activities related to these issues. So,
and a related question, Thomas. So something which is related, Sunanda has asked, is there some activity or program for kindergarten student related to gender equality? So more related to very young learners. Is there some suggestion that you would like to add here?
Oh, I'm afraid that's not my area of expertise. The British Council has.
So we can probably start with using adjectives which are gender neutral, not calling girls beautiful, pretty, things like that. So maybe that could be a good way to start, not stereotyping through the use of your adjectives.
Yeah, I mean, exactly what we have said. And when you do come across material which has a gender bias, just tell the students and say, well, girls can play with toy cars as well as boys, or whatever. Something like distributing, if you work in a preschool or kindergarten and they play with toys, distributing toys, not according to gender, but according to just their interests, and encouraging students to play together in what they're interested in, and trying to neutralize those early perceptions. Just being proactive, having it in the back of your mind, and then acting on it.
Being mindful of the language that you're using.
Being mindful of the language and of your actions and kind of activities. Yeah. So, but have a look at the British Council's early years resources online. The teaching, I think it's teachingenglish.org and learningenglish.org. Both British Council websites for learners and for teachers have some, will likely have some good gender positive resources. So, yeah.
So one more interesting question, which is coming from Datta. She says, in India, gender difference, gender stereotype is one of the major reasons for dropout. How do you deal with guardians who feel that daughters are not as competent as sons?
Yeah, I mean, that's a real challenge. And I mean, just again, when you do have a chance to speak to guardians and parents, I think relating stories of positive experiences with women achieving you know, something impressive or something, just being more independent and yet living lives that are worthy of respect, I think need to be highlighted to people who have their doubts about this. It's a long-term process. We can't force change on communities that aren't immediately ready for it, but we can help shape their thinking by through how we talk to them, use positive examples that you're familiar with successful women who have done well, who have, you know, who support their families, who have achieved something, and encourage, you know, positive outcomes from their side as well. It's a very difficult, it's a very difficult project, and I admire anyone who, you know, who tackles it. I think we need to be sensitive to these cultural, you know, perceptions, and we can't be. I think the wrong approach is to criticize people and to really forcefully insist on things. I think we have to be proactive and in a positive way and respect.
And a good example came in the chat also. So when somebody spoke about bringing in female rickshaw drivers, that could be a good example, a role model to set. And probably other women who have shattered stereotypes could be brought into the classroom, just like the experiment that you shared. So that would be something which they could connect with in real life.
Absolutely, yeah.
Again, another question from Malabika was, my question is, we talk about more number of women's representation in books for gender neutral textbooks. However, it does not ensure inclusion from all class, caste, religion, or race. We can consciously make an effort for the language of teachers. But what about the representation of gender in our books, especially in an Indian context? So again, I think we agreed that it's important to create that awareness.
Yeah, so I think we can, once we kind of acculturate our students to these issues, then we could, you know, kind of get the students to notice some of these things as well, as especially at secondary level and higher. We can get our students to notice biases in the material that they have, to encourage them to look critically at some of the images and learning materials that they see. There's no reason it's only the teacher that should, you know, look critically at it. The students should as well. So it's about awareness raising, and yeah, basically creating alliances with students to also be critical observers of gender inequalities and depictions which are, you know, unequal in their learning materials. So yeah, I think creating allyships with students is really important, and again, it's a process building towards that. It doesn't happen immediately. So yeah, and again, it's about positive role models, being really proactive in I know that, you know, in the class here at the college, we, you know, bring in videos about, there was one on the BBC about a short video about a female kind of hip hop rapper from a minority community in Delhi. She's a young Muslim girl who is a kind of a hip hop rapper. It's a great story. It's a great little video snippet, and for students to see this, especially in non-metropolitan areas of India where there are quite traditional gender roles set up especially at a women's college. I think these are inspirational to not only to women, but the Muslim students. They see somebody similar to them doing something quite interesting. So I think if the students feel represented in the material, if they are acknowledged for who they are, and for what they could be, and their dreams are acknowledged, I think that's really important.
Another interesting question from Abdullah. He says, is gender equality a concern for men? I think, again, we sort of touched upon it, but would you like to say a little more about this?
Well, I think men need to be on side with gender, with promoting gender equality. I don't think that men are very often the victims of discrimination. I don't think I've ever really been discriminated as a man. It's only been a benefit to me. So I don't think, I mean, I think men have to be on side with women. Yeah, there are times when men could be marginalized, but it doesn't happen very often. It's unusual. Yeah, I mean, I've had women bosses who have kind of bullied me before, things like that. Yes, it can happen. So yeah, but it's quite uncommon, and I think the numbers that we give a clear indication of where we are overall in society. So I kind of, whenever, and I've had men approach me, oh, that's discrimination against men. I don't really think men are commonly discriminated against, and it's always said in some sort of jest rather than in any sort of structural reality. So I think it's pretty, the evidence is pretty clear that it's women and girls who are mostly discriminated against.
And one last comment that has been coming in, maybe would like to have a quick reply for that. A couple of people have been asking why we've not focused on other genders. What are the other genders? Can we clarify that? Is there something that you would like to quickly say about that?
Yeah, like I see, suggest some ways to bring awareness on treating third genders and the LGBTQI community. I think this is really important, and I didn't address it because it doesn't enter the discussion often enough, and that in some ways almost deserves a separate discussion. It's obviously quite sensitive. This is where you're getting into territory where conservative communities would have objections to these sorts of issues. So I think you have to understand what's appropriate in the community where you're teaching. I would say try to press those boundaries and push the envelope as much as you can without getting into trouble. Search for allies and NGOs which are supportive, invite speakers if it's appropriate, engage with community members who offer a positive example of people from third gender and LGBTQI communities. I think it's important, and I urge people to become proactive with it, but I think that deserves a kind of its own separate discussion. But yes, and
it calls for another webinar altogether.
Yeah, but I was conscious of using gender and all genders, but I kind of focused through the SDGs for empowering girls and women. Sure. But yes, I think it's a really important point.
Great. So thank you. In the interest of time, we will not be able to take up any more questions, but thank you, Thomas. I think most of the comments coming in are very, very positive, and it's been a very thought-provoking webinar for people who've just started their journey, and equally for people who've already been on the journey and have learned some things. So thank you very much. On this note, I would like to hand over to Ashwini, who can take this forward. Thank you, Thomas.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Here's the link to the feedback form. Please fill it in.
Hi, Ashwini, I will now stop
I need to
recording.
Yes, please. Thank you.